They sleep during the 6 months of their digestion. I was so impressed with this jungle story, I immediately got out my sketchbook and my pencil and began to draw. Now, my drawing number 1 looked like this. I showed my drawing, my masterpiece, to the grown-ups and asked them if it scared them, but they said, "Why be scared of a hat?" My drawing was not a picture of a hat, of course. It was a picture of a boa constrictor digesting an elephant. Grown-ups always need explaining. So I set out to make a second drawing, so they would understand. This time, I would draw the inside of the boa constrictor. My drawing number 2 looked like this. Again, I showed the drawing to the grown-ups, but they said that I should stop drawing silly pictures altogether of boa constrictors inside or outside and concentrate on something serious like history, geography, arithmetic, and grammar. That is why at the age of 6, I abandoned a magnificent career as an artist. They laughed at my drawing number 1 and my drawing number 2 because they did not understand. It is exhausting for children to have to explain things to grown-ups over and over again. So then I had to learn another career and I decided to pilot aeroplanes.
Body with me, it's too heavy. So I'll leave it behind like an abandoned shell. But there's nothing sad about old shells.
Oh, little man, you're afraid. Little man, I want to hear you laugh again.
Tonight, I will return to my own planet.
Oh, dear little man, tell me this is all a bad dream.
No, the thing that is important is the thing that is not seen.
Yes, I know.
And where I live, everything is so small that I can't show you where my star is, but it's better that way. My star will be one of the stars for you, and you will love to watch all the stars in heaven because they will all be your friends. You know what? I have a present for you.
Ah, little man, dear little prince, I love hearing that laugh.
That's my present.
Welcome to the Public Voice Salon. We're an open dialogue on culture and ideas with a special focus on education, the arts, and social change. And tonight, Claudia and I are so excited to be at the theater in the heart of Broadway in New York City with Louise and Bart of the Vagabond Theater Company here at the Playroom Theatre. We just saw a production of The Little Prince and the Pilot. Amazing production of this wonderful novel by Antoine, I'm going to say the name wrong, de Saint-Exupery, is that how you say it? Antoine de Saint-Exupery. I'll hold up the title of The Little Prince. And I just want to say about this book that I never would have read this book if it wasn't for my wife. And she gave me this book as a birthday present 5 years ago, and then I read it, because I probably wouldn't have read a children's book. I'm going to read but it's actually a children's book for adults. Yeah. And so we're going to get into this in this dialogue about the story. So this is a story. This is a dialogue about literature. It's a dialogue about theater. It's a dialogue about The Little Prince. And we'll start with Bart. What was it that gave you the inspiration to do this play? Did you read the play when you were younger? Did you hear about it? What's your relationship with Saint-Exupery in his writing?
Well, a lot of people have heard about The Little Prince. I had heard about him, but what attracted us to the subject was actually an exposition in the Morgan Library here in New York, where there was such a large crowd and an interest in all the manuscript, and there's people that are really adepts of the subject and want to follow it. And there was one man, he had a shoulder bag, and even his email address had the Little Prince in it, and he was born at the same hour exactly that I'm not sure anymore, but
he was born on the day that Saint-Exupery came to New York when he wrote the play, the book, The Little Prince, and that man was so inspired by everything about the life of Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, about his work, he knew everything, and we saw so many people looking at all these little doodles that he made of the Little Prince before. They looked different from what ended up in the book, and also letters he wrote to friends. They were always, he had little scribbles on the side and little drawings, or made a special drawing for a friend, and but he was always a bit uncertain about it. And the Morgan Library has the original script because he wrote it in New York. He was quite unhappy because it was during the war, and he felt horrible because he wanted to help France, but if he would go back, he would have to fight his own countrymen because France was divided into two halves. So he felt helpless and he felt lost in the universe, just like the Little Prince. And I think he went back to his youth and the good memories of his childhood to get him through that time. And some friend, what we have in the play, said, "Oh, what are you drawing, this little man? I mean, it looks good. Do something with it, and stop complaining and do something with this, and write a story. And you can do the illustrations." And that's how it started. And they have the whole script, complete with coffee stains and cigarette ash and creased papers and everything. And that's what inspired us to delve into his life.
What inspired you to start a theater company? Let's talk about your own work in theater. We can go back and forth between that. Yeah.
Well, we first, when we were at drama school, we met in Maastricht, and then I went to London to drama school. You have to prove that you're a professional by doing professional work. And we set up a company doing puppet shows in hundreds of schools in London and in the Netherlands and in America. But the aim was always to produce plays. And we looked for a name, and because we were traveling all over the world, and in Europe, I suppose it's got less of a negative connotation to be a vagabond. It means more that you're sort of, it's not always a beggar, but it's more someone that has a free life, is wanders. You know, maybe they don't have much money like most actors, but they wander from one place to another. And I thought that's what we're doing. We're working in London, we're working in New York, we're working in Belgium, in the Netherlands. And sometimes, yeah, you get work from another company or you do voiceovers. But there's also a lot of work that you have to make yourself. And you look for plays, you go to the library in London, you read all sorts of plays, maybe not too many, a two-hander is easier to produce, but we've produced other plays in New York and in London and in Brussels. So we just felt that, as we were a couple, it'd be easy to produce things ourselves too. You know, that's basically.
My wife and I, Claudia and I, are also a couple, and we love the fact that we have no bureaucracy. There's nobody telling us what to do. You know, we talk over breakfast. Do you think this would be a good topic? That would be a good topic. Yeah. And I think that is really the joy of it. We wouldn't want to have anything that's overly bureaucratized. And we see some of these TV shows, and you see the credits at the end is 10 million credits, and all these people are getting money, and like they're all telling people what to do. We are very simple, very low key. We want to be authentic. Authenticity is really what we're trying for. But do you think it's fair if we look at Broadway today and you look at these big budget plays and you look at, you know, this whole off-Broadway versus Broadway thing? We met at Judson Memorial Church, Louise and I. Now, Judson, just to let people know, is a place that really incubated the growth of off-Broadway back in the 1960s with Al Carmine's. That was a revolution against Broadway, against this upscale, this, treating theater, sort of pitching it to the suburbanites to come in and spend a lot of money. But where's the catharsis? Where's the depth? Where's the complexity? So what's your take on Broadway versus off-Broadway today? Where is experimental theater? Where is that movement when you have King Kong on Broadway?
I've seen very slick Broadway shows, but also very, very good ones. I loved the Beckett play, the Waiting for Godot, with Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart. And that was quite a barren stage. Well, typically Beckett, of course, with a sort of a derelict tree and some rocks and things. So yeah, I've seen very good things too, and also very, very slick things with fantastic dancers and lots of makeup, and it's also a style. I think it all belongs there. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to weigh in on that? Broadway versus off-Broadway, in terms of, the price of theater tickets, in terms of...
Yeah, sometimes we say we stay the eternal students until we're pensioners, but I don't know how you do it. You enter a lottery or something, and we have this Flemish director Ivo van Hoven, who's doing more experimental or deconstructing work. He started in the New York Theatre Workshop, but I followed him when he was in Belgium as a young director. So he grew into it and moved up, and it looks like he wants to maybe transform the theatre. It seems like he's on a mission, really.
He's directing Network now on Broadway, and that's quite a hit. I think they've got a nomination for the Tonys. So he's a Belgian director. So that's an example of somebody who comes from the environment where they start to kick against the establishment and works himself up, and now is part of the establishment and tries to change it from within. Yeah.
So I want to just bring a little history from my own background here. My grandmother was half Dutch.
Oh, really?
Yeah, her father was English, her mother was Dutch, but her English father took off when she was born, and she was raised by her Dutch mother, who was a single mother working as a chambermaid in a hotel in London, until one fine day Blanche Walsh, the great American actress, one of the greatest forgotten actresses of all time, American Broadway actress, was staying in this hotel, befriended my great-grandmother, said, "How'd you like to come to New York and be my head wardrobe lady?" And she said, "Sure." She comes into New York, unpacking the trunk, a photograph falls out of a little girl. "Who's that lovely child?" My great-grandmother starts crying. "It's my daughter. I didn't think I could bring her." So Blanche Walsh looks at the picture. She says, "Look at that lovely child. We can't leave her behind. I'll send for her right away." And my grandmother comes across the Atlantic Ocean on the American Starliner, does not have to go to Ellis Island. There's a limousine waiting at the dock to take her to Blanche Walsh's Park Avenue duplex. That's a true story. Blanche Walsh has been totally forgotten. I am the only person educating people about Blanche Walsh because she was my grandmother's second mother. Not her real mother, her second mother. This is a real-life fairy tale. And Blanche Walsh was the original advocate of a national theater. She and Mark Twain, her friend, came up with this concept in 1895 of a chain of theaters nationwide where regular people could see serious plays at a low cost. Now, it never came to pass in her lifetime, but later on we had the Federal Theater Project and we had other attempts at a national theater. Do you think a national theater could ever be, because England does have a national theater because of who? Laurence Olivier, okay? And Network, the play you just mentioned, came out of the English National Theater.
Yeah, I know, yeah. It's, they should, and they should have social medicine, and they should have social theater, and you know, because it just needs a bit, like, and all the museums have, I know they're doing it in the Metropolitan now too, if you're a New York resident, but in London, Gordon Brown made just all the museums free. It doesn't cost much, in maybe not even a penny or something in a pound, and everyone can enjoy it because some people just can't afford it, and that's the same with theatre, like you say. It just needs a bit of subsidy.
We hear so often from people when they are interviewed where their inspiration came from, and very often it's from a teacher in school or from a play that they saw when they were 5 or a trumpet player they heard, and then that's why they decided to play the trumpet, and then they became famous. So if people are exposed to art, I think it will benefit the world.
Well, just to tell you the origin of this show, because my background is education. Right. So I see myself really as a teacher with a talk show. Yeah. Not as a whatever media personality, I don't know what that is. I'm a teacher with a talk show. And so we really look at education, art, and social change. Those are the 3 parameters. And they all sort of can dance, very nicely together, because let's say art, right? Art goes with education in terms of how did you learn that art, right? And then also in terms of in education, how do we teach that art? Yeah. So why don't we think about your own educations in terms of theater, in terms of art? What were some of your inspirations in life? And was it inside of school or outside of school? Because increasingly we're very critical of schooling, of education, and in particularly in America, there's all this teaching to the tests. We had Diane Ravitch, who's America's leading educational historian, was a guest on our show a month ago, and she completely decried the educational system, how they're taking out art, they're taking out literature. They're taking out literature. So in terms of your own schooling, if you could go back and think about what nurtured you to become people of the theater.
Well, I have an uncle who was an actor, and when I was 12, I wanted to do that, but that's just like my granddad. We did some recordings on the tape, and he said, "You got a good voice, so you should continue doing that." And I went to the academy, what it's called. It's called Academy in Belgium, with a friend, and started to do sort of speaking and then theater too. It made me happy. That was the highlight of the week. It was just a half hour. But I was looking forward to it for Monday. It was on a Friday, and the rest was just boring at school. Well, you had to do it, but sometimes you think you might as well drop out and do that. And I don't know. I suppose in the early days, people just did like an apprenticeship in a theater, and I suppose you can learn it that way too. There's so many techniques too in drama schools that you sometimes think, oh, I have to follow that, or then it's method or whatever, or Meissner. In the end, you just have to do it. I suppose it's the work that counts, and you find your voice or your talent. So I suppose as long as you can learn it somewhere, it's good. But it's true. Sometimes a school can help to set you on the right way.
So Oliver Sacks, the great scientist, gave a lecture at Montclair State University back 10 years ago when I was teaching at Montclair State, and he said something I'll never forget. He said his love of science did not come from school at all, he said. In fact, he said school did more damage to his love of science, but it was because he had an uncle who had a laboratory, and that was where you mentioned your uncle, so very often it is a person. Yeah. It is a person who ignites your... I have to always thank my Aunt Barbara Hall from Bridgeport, Connecticut, who now is 89 years old, but when I was a little boy, was visiting my grandmother in Fort Lee, New Jersey, and talking about a novel that she was reading at the table, and it was like, for me, an alien thing, that people who talk literature and talk about the plots of the novel, this is like a bookish aunt, having one bookish aunt who was a published poet, worked in advertising, but was an English major, right? And took novels seriously, so that's... And
did that one, you wanted to read more because of her?
Absolutely, yeah. And then I was always wrestling with, what should I major in college? And lots of people telling me you should study, business to be practical, and I totally resisted that. And I stuck with my heart, which was literature, and became an English major at Fordham. And it hasn't been profitable in terms of finance, but it has been very profitable, spiritually enriching, and if we could ever get this television show, monetized, we're trying to keep the art of literature alive in the world too. We had Harold Bloom, the great literary critic, on our show last year, and he said that it's dying, in terms of literature in the academy. Everyone's a business major now, so they're taking out literature, so we're losing that complexity, we're losing that, here is a great book, The Little Prince, which your play is based on, and You know, if I could just read the back of the book, just to bring the text into the conversation. You know, this is The Little Prince, Antoine de Saint-Exupery. A pilot stranded in the desert awakes one morning to see, standing before him, the most extraordinary little fellow. "Please," asks the stranger, "draw me a sheep." And the pilot realizes that when life's events are too difficult to understand, there is no choice but to succumb to their mysteries. He pulls out a pencil and paper, and thus begins this wise and enchanting fable that, in teaching the secret of what is really important in life, has changed the world forever for its readers. Few books have been as universally cherished by children and adults alike as The Little Prince. This stunning new translation, together with restored artwork, will capture the hearts of readers of all ages. What are the lessons from this book? What is it that's at the crux of this book in terms of, is it to keep the child in you alive? You know?
That's one thing. And also follow your heart and look with your heart. Like children, they very often, they ask the right questions. Or they say the right things, and when later you learn to be polite and shut up when you think something, or when you would like to know something. But I think he says, go back to that. Try not to lose the child in you, and learn to look with your heart. And yeah.
Sometimes when I do this show and I come here, I think, yeah, there's so much polarization. It's so much pulled apart into money, and people are so obsessed with the smartphone, and everything is translated in money, and it's exactly the opposite about the book. And it's difficult, but you know, he wasn't interested in money at all. He thought it was so boring. And sometimes you think, if people work only for that money at the end of their life, is that what matters? And when we do this play too, we probably lose our shirt over it. But then we've done something which we think fulfills us. And isn't that what matters too? I mean, just to say, oh, we bought an apartment, or we sold it again and it's made 100,000 more. And then I think, okay, and then you need it. Like my mom said, yeah, it's handy, but this is a labor of love, and that's what I find so contrasting with the world I see around me. That, and like he says, you know, man is a knot of relationships, and that those are important. So yeah, that is.
When they interview people after a storm or a flood or something, they've lost their home and their cars and everything. Or when they have had a horrible illness and they recovered, and they always say, everything I had, it's not important. All these worldly goods, a car is just a piece of metal, and at least I have my family still here, or at least, that's what's most important, the relationships, and it's not money. I mean, yeah, well, it's nice if you have it, but
it's the people in our lives that matter. You know. Maxine Greene was a philosopher of education who I mention a lot on our show because she had a big impact on my life. She was 83 years old when we met. I was 37. She lived to be 96, and we became friendly. And one of the things she liked to say is that imagination is the capacity to look at things as if they could be otherwise. Right? So how are we going to change the world if we can't imagine a different possible world that might be more just, more loving, more caring, more fair?
Yeah. And what I liked about Saint-Exupery, I sometimes think that too. So many people are, like he says, a lot of people are, I don't know if he says it that way, are terrible or something, but the few good ones, they make up for all the rest, and that gives you like, oh, okay, so that gives you your hope, because otherwise you can be put down by negative experiences. But those few people, that must be the same with him, must have been the same with him, that he drew inspiration from. There is some good people, even if there's only a couple. It makes up for all the rest, because he was quite manic and depressive. So yeah, he could be very much up there, and then also be depressed because he wasn't allowed to fly anymore, and he crashed his plane, or he was shot down by a German pilot who claimed at the end of his life, he said, I made it all up. He wrote a book about it, but probably he crashed it deliberately into the Mediterranean, no one knows, because he was not allowed to fly anymore, and it was his life. And he started off flying these little open-air cockpit planes and drinking coffee, flying between the stars and imagining a Little Prince. But later in the war, he was flying huge reconnaissance planes, and he'd broken all his bones. He'd crashed at 39. In 1939, he was 39 because he was born in 1900, and he was suffering a lot. So he wasn't very good with the planes. He crashed a lot in the desert and in the, like in our play too. Quite unhandy, not very handy man, a bit clumsy. But so they wanted him off, but he got huge contacts because the book was there was another book already, Wind, Sand and Stars, that was out and got a Booker Prize or something famous recognition, and he had contacts with de Gaulle or with Montgomery, and they let him fly one more time on a reconnaissance flight, but that would have been the last time, and then he didn't come back. They found nothing. They found just strewn wreckage and a little dog tag or amulet, nobody. And some expedition went to the Mediterranean, a Belgian expedition, and they found pieces over a very large area, and that might have suggested he'd crashed it vertically. But then the French banned the expedition from being there because it goes against the idea of this hero who was shot down by the Germans. And I suppose there's a lot of commercial, because the images are printed on mugs and cups, and that makes still a lot of money. The text is not used so much anymore. So yeah. So he drew his inspiration from mankind and from the positive people in his life, but he must have been quite depressed, like he was when he wrote The Little Prince too. It was more like an escape while he was in exile here in New York. And he couldn't go back, and the French were criticizing him because he wasn't supporting de Gaulle, who was in exile in London, and that was the north of France, the Free France, but the south was the Vichy regime collaborating with the Germans. He was from the south, he was aristocracy. His loyalties were a little bit towards the aristocracy in France, but they were collaborating, so he wasn't outspoken enough, and he was criticized in New York for not saying, like de Gaulle. But he said, he didn't agree with de Gaulle, who said, we've lost the battle, but we haven't lost the war. I don't know. In the end, they won, but he thought, yeah. And then he wanted to go and fight the Germans, which in the First World War he was too young, and now he was too old. So, he wanted to prove that he was a patriot. He loved this country. So,
when I was 17 years old, I had no desire to drive. I had no desire to get a driver's license. But you know what I wanted to do? Fly.
Yeah.
I wanted to fly because I have an uncle, my Uncle Bill, who was in the 101st Airborne, who was a paratrooper and a great pilot, took me up when I was 12 years old in his little Cessna plane, and he said, all right, John, take the control. I said, okay, now I want you to fly the plane. What? Turn it to the left, turn it to the right, up, down. I was so thrilled by that. I was into flying as a kid, and when I was 17, I said, I want to learn how to fly. I start to take lessons. I'm up in the air, and for some reason I got scared, and there was a plane crash. I'll never forget, there was a plane crash, and it was on the front page of the Daily News, and and I'm looking at that and thinking, oh my God. And there was one pilot, the guy that was training me, everything I did, he said, was great. Turn this way, turn that way, you're doing wonderful. And then he couldn't make it to class, and the head of the school, who was a real tough cookie, and he was like, all right, I want you to do this, I want you to make a maneuver. I'm like, what? He goes, you don't know this yet? I said, no, you're supposed to know this stuff. I got so scared, I walked away from it. I said, never again. And that was the same airport that John F. Kennedy Jr. took off from, Caldwell Airport. Yeah. That's where I was taking lessons. So I'm kind of glad I walked away, because I think it is dangerous. And you could see that even Saint-Exupery, after 2 crashes, which he survived, he then died in a 3rd plane crash. So that's
more than 2 crashes.
Really?
Yeah, he almost drowned. He had a crash where all his bones were broken, and he fell into I think he was in a coma for a bit. There were other crashes where he had gangrene, and they wanted to amputate his hand or his leg, and his wife said, no, that's not going to happen, and she put all her power and healing hands on him, and that helped to heal the wounds. So many crashes, and he was also what we have in the beginning of the play. He was doing stunt flying in the aerial acrobatic team in Paris, and he was just a young guy. So, and sometimes he was writing while flying, and then just not really taking drifting away. Oops, sorry, almost crashed. But he was never afraid of death. No.
They were setting up the mail routes, and that was like, you know, a letter. There was no communication, no email, no text, no phone. But they had some radio contact, but they were flying mail. Like in a love letter was more important than the pilot or the plane. They were risking their lives, and they crashed. Like his friend Mermot in the Andes in South America and Argentina. He was lost, and he was walking around for days in the snow. How he survived it. In the end, he vanished over the ocean, over the Atlantic Ocean. But they were falling. You know, lots of them. They were just. There's a movie made about that, isn't it? Wind, Sand and Stars, I think. I don't know who is in it. A famous movie. But it was such an important thing then, just the communication, because people were valuing a letter so much, writing.
He has done stunts for another movie about one of his books, and the stunt pilot said, "Well, I'm not going to do this. This is too dangerous." And then they got the pilot, the writer, out and said, "Saint-Ex, can you do the stunts?" And he said, "Yeah, no problem," because he had to do I don't know what, but some daredevil stuff for the movie. So. But actually, when we did the show in Edinburgh, there's a lot of competition, 3,500 shows. So you have to walk around with your flyers, and you speak to a lot of people. And I met a couple of people who said, "I'm a pilot." And one of them said, "You know that because of this writer, I became a pilot." I read his books about flying, and I thought, gosh, if this is flying, I know what I want to be. The way he wrote about flying, that did it for him. And many other pilots came to see the show. We had a funny combination of people with children and pilots. And
yeah, they always ask, "Are you a pilot? Do you fly?" And I didn't know what he meant. I meant you flyer or something with fly. But no, I said yes. But I'm not a pilot. So yeah. But they were there. Yeah. They want that comradeship, and they look for that. That's sort of a bond.
Let's talk about the wife now, Consuelo, and their relationship, because you feature Consuelo in the play. What was it like? What was their marriage like? Was it stormy? Okay.
Even shout, "Let's go back to the ground. I feel ill and I don't want to faint."
Oh, you're not feeling airsick?
No, just a little.
Here, a pill, and stick out your tongue. Oh, such small hands, children's hand. Give them to me for always.
I would like to keep my hands for myself.
Okay.
For me, it must have been, they couldn't live together, but they couldn't live apart. And they had 2 apartments on Park Avenue South. I mean, he had rich, and she found them a house on Long Island, and it looked beautiful. And then he got bored there too. But they couldn't live in the same apartment, so they lived one above the other or something, and a beautiful view over Central Park. But they were arguing all the time. But there was great love too, I suppose. Yeah, she survived him long into the 70s or 80s and renewed the copyright. But I think it's she inspired him. She was his muse, like with Dali. You have, I don't know, the muse, and she locked him up too, and he had to paint. And it's the same here,
Salvador Dali?
Yeah, his wife was very. Gala, his wife, the muse, she locked him up, and he had to paint. So, but it produced great things. But it's like, I don't know, what is a muse? I mean, she's quite tough on him, and the same here. So that's what we have in the play too. That he has to finish this book, and it's probably although he loved writing at night and when reason sleeps. He didn't like words very much because they were a source of misunderstanding. So he was correcting and throwing things away all the time and destroying it and crumbling it up and then writing anew and cutting down and to the essence, the bare bones, because there's so many words. Like we now speak a lot of words, but you can't. The true things are just felt, and they are, then once you say them, they're often gone, and then and it vanishes. So he got the essence. I don't know. She had to follow him to Europe, and they escaped via Spain, and because of.
He lived in Casablanca when he was flying the airmail route from Toulouse, Dakar, and he was. They were living in Casablanca for some time, and she was always very anxious if he would return. So she was going to the station. Have you heard back? Has he landed there? Has he nail biting business? Yeah. So she was really worried and always very happy when he came back, because in the beginning they didn't even get a radio, so you were flying out to the next stopover, and the one stopover would say, okay, he left now, so the other ones would think, okay, so then probably in 2 hours we can expect him. But if you had any trouble with your engine halfway, you were supposed to land and repair your own engine, and she would be fretting by the phone. Yeah.
And the Arabs would capture and keep pilots as hostages and get ransom for it, and sometimes they slit their throats just to scare, so they had to go and free them, or if a plane had crashed, they'd go there with another plane and then try to get it started, and they often did, and repair it on the spot, and then get it started again. So yeah.
So let's segue in the time we have left. Let's talk about you as a couple now. Let's talk about your own process and how you come up with plays, and you're not as tumultuous as Consuelo and right, I imagine. But what does it take to construct a play like this? Share with our audience. People who may have creative proclivities and have always thought about maybe doing this kind of work. What would your advice be to people?
I think Louise can write very beautifully. She always writes in her diaries, and I say you should publish it, even if we're in New York, and she writes every day. She's always writing everything that happened, and she should publish it in a Dutch paper, but she doesn't think it's good enough. So I keep stimulating her, and same with this play too, because I think she can write more beautiful. We've written like a film script and stuff like that. I made a little movie of it when we were living in London, and I think her writing is more beautiful. It just takes that. So I'm stimulated. We wrote this in a garden of a friend in Los Angeles. Started writing and on a little attic upstairs in Brussels, where the famous maker of bags, I don't know what they're called, he was making his bags. Delvaux is a famous name. It was at night, our neighbor said, 50 years ago, working, and now she was working there and writing. So yeah, in the end it came together, but it has gone through several transformations, from like more for children, more like The Little Prince, more about his life only, now more a fusion of the two, and this, because for Edinburgh it can only be an hour long, it has to be condensed. But it could be a lot longer, because there was more characters in there, like the lamplighter and the snake and the well and all sorts of things. So it's more a condensed version. But the writing, you should ask her more.
Well, I have a question. You were in L.A. You were so close to Hollywood. What the heck? Why didn't you just go right to Hollywood? You had the script.
So they might.
What are we doing here? Why isn't this on the silver screen?
Not very good on the.
Very modest. I can see. He speaks very highly of you.
Yeah, well.
Facts. I mean, she can construe a play, and that is important, because it's not always easy. She says, "Oh, it's all his writing," but I don't think that's true. It's your writing too. You used some of his writing, but.
I want to bring some democracy into the room right now, because we have two people in our audience here, which is wonderful that two people stayed behind to watch this interview, and I'm going to give an opportunity to either of you gentlemen, if you want. You don't have to, but if you want, because you're here, to ask a question, to pose a question or make a comment, and Claudia will record that for the show. So, Claudia, show the audience, show we're here. We're in time and space. We're not in some antiseptic studio in Radio City Hall like these corporate media shows where you don't know where the heck they are. Where is a time and place, baby? We're at the Playroom Theatre, on the heart of Broadway, with authentic art. This is art. This isn't fluff. I'm proud to be here. I'm proud to be with art.
Yeah, I think it matters. It's very important, and even if we lose our shirt over it, because it costs so much, it's thousands and thousands of dollars. Yeah, so be it. Because you want to do what you've trained for and what you want to do in life. And we'll ask Mum for a little compensation. I don't know, but Mom, you
Such a thing.
You always said you find a little theater somewhere in Brussels. Are you performing it in a little theater in New York? And she's so proud that we're doing that. So yeah.
Well, at this point, I want to give a shout out to our dear friend Bob Thomason at Judson Church. And probably if it wasn't for Bob, we wouldn't be doing the show right now, because Louise got up at Judson Church. Judson Church is one of those churches that they have an open mic during the service, okay, that there is a portion of the service for announcements. Not every church does this. And a portion in the service for celebrations and concerns. And Louise got up and she was making an announcement, but she told a little story. And she talked about Bob Thomason and how much he meant to her. And this is a man who means a lot to us as well. This is a man who sings to people on the subway. He's about as authentic and spontaneous as you can get. I said, any friend of Bob's, we have to talk to Louise, and we're here. So this is why, people say to me, how do you get your guests? How do you get your ideas? Well, we live our life. We talk to people. That's why we're here, And yes, we have a question. Okay, audience member. Okay, here we go. Claudia, you getting this, baby? Okay, good. Okay, here we go.
This is it on?
Yes,
Okay.
is it on?
Yeah, fantastic. I'm Gerald Cantor. I have a master's in education, and I'm an equity actor, SAG actor. I came here by complete, not even half, serendipity. My question. The only question really that hasn't been answered, satisfied, and I'm so complacent, but a question did come in my mind, and it was, I was going to email it or something to say, Louise and the general, Bart, excuse me, will you please someday, somehow, sometime, especially if we live as long as Methuselah lived, because I see how long you're going to do this, would you write a play about Albert Einstein, and I will play it with your husband or with you as well, and do it in tandem someplace all over the world. I speak German and French. Not to self-promote myself. That's the only question. That's the only honest question.
Well, I want to just respond to that, then we're going to get the other question. I want to respond to that quick, that my dear friend Richard Dreyfuss, the actor who I got to know through his civics project. Richard Dreyfuss has a civics project, and he's trying to bring back the teaching of civics in our schools and in our communities, and I'm working with him on that. But Richard Dreyfuss played Einstein in a play. He was Albert Einstein, and it was in New Haven, okay? It got rave reviews, and shame on Broadway for not picking that up. That should have been on Broadway, okay? So, Richard, you owe me one, okay? We have another question over here. Okay.
Yeah, hi, my name is Barry Chiat, and I'm getting back to the value of early childhood education after 30 years. So just taking the idea of the Little Prince and, like the Emperor's New Clothes and things like that, if children, we placed the focus on the value of early childhood education and allowed a generation to grow up with some love and compassion and understanding, like looking at the amazing things that those students did at Broward County, did more with gun control, and the 16-year-old from Sweden who is doing more with climate control. So I'm just curious about, your ideas, these thoughts about letting children have a voice.
Beautiful. Well put, well put. So I'm going to hand the microphone over to both of you, and you just speak to those questions.
I've never wanted to grow up or I'm dissociated with, we don't have children, but maybe we thought we weren't old enough yet, or I don't know. But Greta Thunberg, we go in Brussels to the climate marches, and they're all young, but not all. And there was a climate conference in NYU this morning, and there were more like pensioners. But it seems that a certain range of people, from when they are adults, don't bother with that because they're too busy with the careers or with the children. So we associate more with younger people, I guess. So we always remain students, and yeah, maybe we'll be pensioners all of a sudden. I don't know, but it's like that whole bit in between was quite boring. I know she never wanted to grow up when she was becoming, adolescent. You didn't like that when you was 12 or 13, so you thought it was pretty monotonous, yeah. But I think it comes from there. I think it comes from, I don't know why it is. Grandparents go to the climate marches with their grandchildren. You don't see many of our age or 40s or something. So whether they have more of the testosterone or whether it's the drive, they don't care. They take the risks, or they see that. I don't know. They see that it matters because they're going to be older when the whole thing is in 15 years. It's maybe also already irreversible because once the ice melts, it warms up ice again, and it melts too. And what we're doing, even whatever with plastic bags in New York, and people think you take your stuff out of the shop and you think you've stolen it because it's not in a plastic bag. That's just going to have to change so much, and it's so wasteful. Although the air is a bit cleaner than in Brussels, where we all have diesel cars, but I think it comes from them, and it shouldn't only come from them. I think it should come. I think they always say now they have elections in Europe or in Belgium, and then they say it's climate change is going to be social or it's not going to be. But I think we should also convince the people that have the money that it matters to them too, even if it's right and green, as long as it's also green, because in Europe it's also left and green goes together, but then the others just don't care, and the right, so it's right and left stuff. Well, this matters for the whole planet, and maybe the young people will change that, and they realize that is important, and not just what adults think now is so important.
Claudia and I have no children either, but we've given birth to 150 TV shows. Right. I think this is, what's this, honey, 151, I think we're up to? Okay, so you could respond to the questions. Yeah.
I think it's very good that children get more of a voice now. Sometimes there are TV programs where they let children talk, and usually they're very hilarious because they speak from their heart, and they're not inhibited. And also, I think that it's if teachers can do something for that it's so important. If teachers can help the children express them and give them a podium, that would be very good. And I think it's happening more and more. I mean, in the old days, children were supposed to shut up, and now they can answer things. And I don't know much about Mr. Einstein, but I'll delve too in it.
I want to say Einstein was a socialist, folks.
Oh, right. Yeah.
He was a socialist. So this whole thing about, and he was a pretty smart guy.
Yeah.
He was pretty smart, But yeah, I think the educational.
That's what I'm doing now. I'm pursuing it, but I sense
Yes.
weakness, so I figured, why not?
Yeah, but she needed a lot of encouraging. It's not in her nature. She loves gardening. She's always in the garden. I have to pluck her out of the garden, and it's taken years, right, just to get the play.
Well, this play took a long time because I had to do so much research, and I discovered more books and more letters and more articles. And oh gosh, he has been a reporter as well. I didn't know that. And then you have so much information, and then you have to pick and choose and put them into order and kill your beauties.
You could easily do double 2 hours or 3 hours of play, because so.
How have you changed? How have you become different because of this process, because of what you've learned, because of what happened in a performance? Since you started the project with The Little Prince, how have you become different? What have you learned? How about that? What have you learned? What do you take away from this? anything transformative. I'm very into transformation, and how do you, when I teach to transform. I want people to become different. I want the end of the class people to be different. I want to be different at the end of class, right? If we're the same, then what's the point, right? How does this, did this give you some kind of voice? Did it give you a question, a curiosity? What do you take away? And while you're pondering that, let me just read something in the beginning. I found this very inspiring, but I also found inspiring my darling wife. She wrote, "Happy birthday." She put that to me with a smiley face, okay? This is in 2013 when she said that, from Claudia. And I want to just read very briefly here. This is the dedication of the book to Leon Worth. Yeah. All right, this was Antoine de Saint-Exupery dedicated this to his friend Leon Worth. And he says this: "I ask children to forgive me for dedicating this book to a grown-up. I have a serious excuse. This grown-up is the best friend I have in the world. I have another excuse. This grown-up can understand everything, even books for children. I have a third excuse. He lives in France, where he is hungry and cold. He needs to be comforted. If all these excuses are not enough, then I want to dedicate this book to the child whom this grown-up once was. All grown-ups were children first, but few of them remember it, so I correct my dedication. To Leon Worth when he was a little boy." And so as you're thinking about how you may have become different, I want to express how I feel different now, because this is such a thrill to be here on Broadway. I mean, maybe it's not the Golden Theater, but we are right in the heart of Broadway, and this is the closest to Broadway we've ever come to film a show. And being the spiritual great-grandson of Blanche Walsh, who was America's version of Sarah Bernhardt, that is very, very meaningful for me. And just walking here today, going past the George M. Cohen, I want to sing, "Give my regards to Broadway." This is a thrill. It's exciting. It matters. And even with all the complaints about Broadway, but there is a lot of serious stuff being done, There really is. There is a lot of serious stuff. Nathan Lane is in, what's he in now? The Shakespeare, and he's out there. There's some really good stuff going on Broadway as well. And the one you mentioned too, that started at the National Theater Network. I mean, who can think of a better story for our time when you think of the media? I mean, think of the movie with Faye Dunaway, and think about Peter Finch. I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it. I feel that way every night when I'm watching breaking news. I want to open my window and anyway, but I always think art should be transformative in some way. Or what have been the conversations? How have people reacted to this work? What has been memorable in terms of the takeaway from people's reactions?
Well, there was one lady who came to review it from Café Babel. I think it's a website review or something. But there's people that they just indeed go back to their childhood, but they think it's so beautiful. But she'd read all his writings, so some people are really up to because he's written so many. I don't know. This book has become such an icon, but the other work is very beautiful too. And they think it's beautifully done. But we see ourselves very much also as a conduit through which he speaks, because we're the actors. But so we like to get the audience to make their own interpretation of it.
Yeah,
and
it's more an idea that you share what he wrote down or what he thought with other people and get them enthusiastic. And when you hear people after the show, they really like it and they like the imagination, and that's great, because I think imagination is a big force for everybody. That spurs their own imagination, and that's why I like theater, because you're allowed to imagine things.
Could I say something about André Gide?
Yes.
André Gide, yeah, because there is a connection between Gide and my own education at NYU, where I studied in a program for English education in the mid-1990s, and it was considered a very forward-thinking program, which was founded by Louise Rosenblatt, who I think should be a household name instead of Kim Kardashian. She was a literary theorist, educational thinker and philosopher who believed in interaction. She said that when you read a literary text, it has to do with the interpretations, and there should be lots of dialogue in the classroom, unlike the way English is normally taught, which is like there's a right answer and everybody's afraid and you have to say what's right. She opened up the play of dialogue in a classroom. And Louise Rosenblatt, she went to Barnard, had a degree in anthropology. Then she was Margaret Mead's roommate too at Barnard. Then she went to the Sorbonne and got a doctorate in comparative literature. Okay. Then she went to Paris and hung around André Gide and Marcel Duchamp and fell in with this group of artists and radicals. She came back to New York. She wrote this book called Literature as Exploration, which is at my bedside. I come out of this work, where in my English classrooms we sit in a circle, we dialogue. What do you think? What do you feel? And my students tell me, no teacher has ever asked me what I thought before. We don't even know the names of any of the students in the other classes. We just know. So Gide was an influence on Rosenblatt, who was an influence on me. So it's all kind of full circle, but the dialogue, it's all about the dialogue. We're having a dialogue now. Yeah. This is free scripted. We're not planning this. And I think people are getting away from conversation in our culture, I think. We walk into cafes and everybody's on the laptop and they're like this. No, you're sitting next to somebody that could be a million miles away. They could be on an asteroid, but they're sitting next to you and, nobody talks.
Yeah, I was at a screening of the SVA short films, animation films yesterday. And I was struck how many films were about loneliness and about one person looking in the subway and everybody else has a sort of a blank piece of paper with sellotape stuck to his forehead, and they all sit there like blank-faced, or they sit like this. And it was all about loneliness, and other films were about, I want to escape this world, I want to go and fly with the stars. And I thought, well, you should come and see our play. But you feel like, how does that happen? We have so much communication and we're not communicating. How does that work?
Yeah, come see the play and then go talk about it. Go to a cafe. That's the old New Yorker style, right? Yeah. You go to a film, you go to a play, you go out, you talk, you gab, and the meaning comes in the discourse. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you don't even know what you think until you start to talk about it, and you hear what someone else says, and then that leads you to say a story. Yeah. So it's all about the richness of the dialogue. Yeah. That comes. That's the interpretation part. And it's the social part. It's fun. Yeah. We're humans, and we're learning and we're growing. And this has been a very growthful experience for me as well, and for Claudia to be with you here. And it all started in Judson Church.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it's. I told Louise, you must go up there and talk. When she said, and
you did that. Oh,
and she did, and I thought, oh, I'm proud of her, because she stands there and she can just talk
She was amazing. Yes.
Yeah. Out of, how do you call it? Just so that got some people interested, and she just said, oh, we're going to need chess pieces. Well, let's walk into the chess shop on Sullivan, I don't know. And then she gets the guy to borrow her all the chess pieces, and then find in the Salvation Army a chessboard. It's just asking, and with materials for the arts too. Roy from Judson Church, he set up an appointment, and we could get some stuff. We wanted to get an overhead projector because she was doing sand drawings in Edinburgh, but we couldn't bring it with us, and it's quite hard to find one here. Just something that with a glass plate, and she does like what she does on the floor now with chalk. It was projected onto the sheet. So we went to the material for the arts to look for it. But maybe next week we go back and maybe we find one, or I don't know. So.
We're almost out of time, but I want to say something about the power of love. If it wasn't for love, we wouldn't have a show. Claudia's, her love, her belief in my craziest dreams. I want to have a TV show. Okay, she said yes. And look at that. She's filming us. She's part of this. She's the co-producer. We like to quote Paulo Freire, who was a great Brazilian educator and philosopher, who said, we need to teach for a world in which it's easier to love. This is very, very hard to test this on standardized tests, but love, I think, is more important than anything. But also art and love and culture, this is can all go together as well. And so thank you, both of us, for being on the Public Voice Salon today. Louise and Bart, good luck with the Vagabond Theatre, and wishing you all the best.
Thank you very much for letting us do the interview and speaking through Saint-Exupéry to hopefully a ever-growing audience, which would be lovely, all over the world. You know, maybe next year in Los Angeles or in Belgium. Like, you know, it always takes a lot of organizing, but it's also fulfilling to do something, to create, and to, you know, even make the planes like Louise does with her hands, and she's painting them, and, you know, little things. It's
Final word to Louise. Real quick.
It was great to do the play, and it's always great to hear afterwards what people thought of it and share the work.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
The work goes on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.